I just think he is fundamentally ill-suited to being Prime Minister. This is someone who has no vision for this country, total inability to communicate with the public. We're giving 130 million quid every year to Pakistan in foreign aid. Suspend the foreign aid, suspend the visas, use the levers of the British state. Decent people are out on the streets protesting, and they think that their views are being totally dismissed at the moment. In fact, it's worse than that. They're not even being just dismissed, they're being smeared. They're being smeared as racist. If you feel threatened by these people, then tomorrow, the next day, they might be staying in a migrant hotel or in an HMO next door to you. So if you don't want to walk through that camp, you don't want these people in our country either.
Robert, so 14 years in government, what's the one thing the Tories got right and one thing they got wrong, their biggest mistake?
I think probably education reform is a thing that we should be deservedly most proud of. Our kids are now amongst the most literate and numerate in the Western world. And why is that? Because we thought very carefully in opposition about what we were going to do if we got into government, and then we did it. And we had the political will to actually challenge the blob, the establishment, and make change happen. The free schools, rolling out more academies, changing the curriculum, all of that has borne fruit. And that's a huge tribute to Nick Gibb, Michael Gove, actually David Cameron, who backed them up time and again, even in the tough times, which you need. You need a prime minister who will back you when you're doing hard things. What was the worst decision? Well, probably the points-based immigration system that came in after the 2019 general election. We'd promised time and again to control immigration. The minister at the time created a system far more liberal than the one that we had when we were in the EU, led to record numbers of people coming into the country, and the wrong types of people, invariably low-skilled people who will be a massive drain on this country. And I fought very hard in my tenure as immigration minister to unwind that. It was essentially a dogfight. It achieved some reforms. We're starting to see that now in the numbers where net migration is falling by 300,000 or 400,000, but that's nowhere near where it needs to be. We've got to get it right down to the historic levels that I knew when I was a child. You know, we didn't always live in an age of mass migration. For most of our lives, actually, the number of people coming into this country every year net was very low. And I want to bring it right down to that again.
Do you think the Tories have lost trust on that issue in particular? I mean, can you even, in one term, can you convince the public, given how badly it went wrong last time, that in 4 years from now, you should be trusted again to do it differently?
Well, I'm under no illusions about how difficult that task is going to be.
Of course.
And I've probably been as or more painfully honest about the mistakes of the last Conservative government than anyone in the party today. We lost the election because on a number of issues, particularly immigration, we broke our promises. We let people down. Ultimately, that's why I chose to resign from Rishi Sunak's cabinet, because I wasn't prepared to go along with this and just be another minister making promises, breaking promises, and leaving the country to pick up the price of that. It's not going to be easy, but I think if we are honest, if we listen to the public, show that we have changed, and then bring forward serious answers to those challenges like immigration, I think in time the public will start to give us a hearing again.
Yeah, so I've been obviously following what you're saying on this quite closely, and you've been saying recently, deport every single illegal migrant who's here, right? But, I mean, realistically, how is that possible? You have to marshal all the resources of the state, and we'll come to the blob and all that, but just practically speaking, how do you do that if, in 5 years' time, you guys are back in the hot seat?
Well, I come to this from a simple principle that a country without borders isn't really a country at all. So you have to be able to defend our borders. And the cost of not doing so, the cost of the failure to have a secure border is immense right now. You're seeing that with the proliferation of hotels. I was at one of the protests in Epping at the weekend. And the patience of the public with this has completely snapped. But it's more than just that. You're looking at billions of pounds being wasted on this crime taking hold in some parts of our country that we shouldn't be having. And the social fabric of our country starting to tear at the seams. So we have to fix this. I do believe very strongly that we have to set out to deport every single illegal migrant. Can we do this? Well, it will be a big task. Of course it will. But I believe it's possible. You've got to take a much more muscular approach than any prior government has done. Use some political will for once. You know, it's absurd today that we read that David Lammy is negotiating with Pakistan as to whether they will take back 3 grooming gang perpetrators, rapists. And in return for that, Pakistan are asking for us to restore flights from a discredited airline to the UK. We're giving 130 million quid every year to Pakistan in foreign aid, and tens of thousands, maybe more, of visas to them. Suspend the foreign aid, suspend the visas, use the levers of the British state in a way we simply haven't had the courage to do in recent years. And I think if you do that, you'd be surprised the impact that you can have. And look at other countries. Australia, people said it was impossible for them to get a grip on illegal migration. They did it within a matter of weeks. Look what's happened in the United States.
Yeah.
The Trump administration have come in and within a matter of months have reached the point where almost no one is crossing the southern border. It's only 18 months or so ago that I went to Eagle Pass in Texas, which was at that point the epicenter of the border crisis that they had. And the Rio Grande there, which is shallow enough to walk across, had people walking across almost like biblical levels of people crossing every day. Today, almost no one is doing that because they implemented a very tough policy, but one which has worked. And that is what I want to see happen in this country too.
But it's interesting, perhaps there's will amongst the public. I mean, clearly there is. I mean, you're doing all these videos where you're in Calais. So we'll come to all of that and the public attitude towards this. But I still want to ask you again the political will and the blob and the sort of institutional resistance that you're going to face. Even you have said, when you were last in government, that was very hard as a minister to resist. Activist judges, whether it was, Whitehall, yourself in the Home Office. So all of this is going to work against you. Now, let's take your time in the Home Office for a specific example. How are you going to navigate that next time if you're back in? You're going to be facing these civil servants who are ideologically opposed to you, in your view. What are you going to do about that?
Well, this is why we have to use this period in opposition wisely,
right? Okay.
To draw up a very serious plan.
But do you think your colleagues agree with you on this? They're quite muscular on this as well.
They do, and I think more so every day. And this is the reason why Kemi Badenoch, our leader, is putting so much store on thinking carefully about what actually needs to be done, so that if we were lucky enough to be in government, we can actually get things done and get it right this time. Because no one would give us a second or a third chance. If we're lucky enough to be in government again, we have to get this right. But you're right to say that there is a whole range of things that we'd have to tackle. I've said that the Home Office should be broken up. I think there should be a department which deals with crime and terrorism, but separately, you need to have a very tough and robust border security department, which is staffed by people who are as driven as I am by answering this question. How do you secure our borders? I've said that whilst obviously it's critical that we free ourselves from the international treaties and conventions that have hidebound us for too long, like the European Convention on Human Rights, there's no point doing that if we simply replace activist judges in Strasbourg with activist judges here in the UK. So we also need to think very carefully about how we tackle that issue. And I've been exposing that in recent months as Shadow Justice Secretary. I think we've got to think about how we appoint judges and how we remove judges, frankly, if they're bringing their politics to their job as a judge and bringing the independence and impartiality of the judiciary into disrepute. We'll also have to work out how we actually deport people from this country. And that's why I say use our foreign aid, use our visas, use every lever that we have of the British state to actually tackle this issue so that never again are we held to ransom by comparatively small countries, Eritrea, Ethiopia, players who we should be able to exert pressure on. And it's not a lot to ask to say to these countries, take back your own citizens, take back foreign criminals who should not be in our prisons, get them back to their home countries. That's what the public expect, and it's the least that we should be doing.
I mean, it does feel like the party is on a journey when it comes to the ECHR. So are you going to announce what the final position is at conference? I mean, so why wait? Why not do it now? You've been quite forthright on your position on it. but I'm not sure the party's quite ready yet. So are you internally having this conversation? Is there a battle on this?
Well, the party's chosen to give this careful thought, to ask Lord Wolfson, a very senior lawyer, to think carefully about how you leave the European Convention, if that's what we choose to do. And then Kemi will make an announcement at or around conference. My own position is very clear.
Yeah.
It has been for a long time. I think we should leave. I don't think it's reformable. You've seen recently where other European leaders like Giorgia Meloni,
Yeah,
I have
of
a lot
course.
of time for, have asked for a reform process to start, and it's been chucked back in her face, almost like the court has stuck two fingers up to her. So it cannot be reformed. We will need to leave. That's my view. We'll see what the party chooses to say later in the summer.
Yeah. Do you think the party, irrespective of policy, has a broader branding problem? Right. So, all right, let's talk about Reform briefly. Okay. So Reform this week have got these these football jerseys that they've come out with. I can't really imagine the Conservative Party at the moment coming out with a Conservative Party FC football jersey and having a bunch of 16 or 18.
Well, there were those Bobby J baseball.
Well, the Bobby J. Well, yeah, sorry, yeah. I think we have one hanging around somewhere, but it'll be here somewhere. But right, that's Bobby J. That's not the Conservative Party logo or branding.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, I would say that the Reform FC tops only have one player's name on the back, don't they?
Yeah.
Which does tell its own story. But look, I am the first to say that the Tory party needs to change fundamentally.
Yeah.
And the path to restoring our fortunes comes from being very clear about what we got wrong and levelling with the public about that, and then turning a page on the recent past and presenting a very different party and saying that never again are we going to get into some of the situations that we did, particularly in the last years when we were in office, like the mistakes that were made over the mini budget, which were frankly careless, candid, unconservative, or the decision to create an immigration system where legal migration spiked completely unconscionably. We've got to be a different party. That's what I want us to.
So is that your sort of citizen journalism or the videos you're doing at the moment? Is that part of that push? Are you moving into a new media space there, talking directly to voters rather than through the usual channels? Is that the...
I think the British state is broken.
Yeah.
I think it's fundamentally broken, and the country is in massive peril right now. We're facing economic, societal decline. I'm in opposition. I can ask questions in Parliament, but usually the ministers never answer them. I can make speeches and pontificate in the House of Commons, or I can get out of a suit, get out of Westminster and take up the issues that people across this country are raising with me every day and try to shame the government, shame the authorities into action. And I've found that is what the public want, and it can also be surprisingly effective. Look at the fare dodging video that we did a few months ago. We're now told that in the month or so following that, the number of people being fined for, skipping the barriers on the tube here in London went up 50 or 60%. So it's had an impact. And I want to take up more issues like that. I've just been in Calais, but I'm also taking up issues like tradesmen's vans being broken into and their tools nicked, issues that most people in Westminster ignore. Probably a lot of people in the liberal media establishment have no conception of whatsoever. But, those are the issues that my constituents care about. I represent a small town in North Nottinghamshire. A lot of white van men, tradespeople there. That's the backbone of the community that I support. My dad started his business with a white van parked on our drive. And I remember what it was like when in the middle of the night things were nicked, when the unit that he had was broken into and him and my mum had to get up and go and see what had happened, often before the police had arrived, and we would wait to find out what was going on. These are the issues that affect working people in this country. I want to be their voice. And if I can use social media as a tool to affect change, then I'm going to keep doing that.
So you attracted some criticism for this. Don't know if you saw this, but Alistair Campbell, who is now a famed podcaster, the rest is politics, he said that those videos represent politics, or rather populism, at its most venal. So your videos specifically, what's your response to that?
Look, I don't think populism is a dirty word. If that means taking up the concerns of working people in this country, then sure, I will do that every day.
So you'd embrace
every day of the week.
Populist.
Look, I don't see it as some kind of insult.
Right.
I think that politicians should be trying to take up the issues that the public actually care about. And in my time in politics, I've seen people, supposedly intelligent people, trying to reason away the concerns of working people and say, oh, it's, you know, it's too difficult to stop the boats because of international law, or, you know what, London is actually a very safe city. Yeah. All those people who are worried about their mobile phone being nicked, or their daughter being attacked on the street when they're walking home from school, they should just look at the graphs and the data, and then they would think differently. I think it's important that we actually listen to the public,
yeah,
and we take up their concerns. And also the idea that Alistair Campbell should now pose as the guardian of truth and honesty in our politics is completely ludicrous. This is a man who's probably done more to damage public trust and confidence in politics than anyone else in my lifetime. You know, I'm old enough to remember the dodgy dossier and the Iraq war. And I think he's actually rattled as well, because I call him out. You know, I said that actually the disastrous wars that he and Tony Blair took us into in Iraq and Afghanistan, these failed liberal interventionist conflicts, are one of the reasons why so many people are on the move in the world today. It's one of the reasons why there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan coming into Europe, heading to the UK. The migration crisis partly fueled by the disastrous mistakes that they made when they were in office. So, you know, he can say what he likes. I don't really care, but I'm going to keep on calling him out.
I mean, he's part of the new media revolution, I suppose, isn't it? I mean, what do you think of that more broadly? All these, we're one of them now. So podcasts, another one, news agents, all these guys coming into this space.
Well, the more I welcome,
yeah,
I welcome the fact that there is now this.
Is that the way
flourishing of different outlets? The fact that not everything has to be channeled through the traditional mainstream media, certainly the BBC. Some of those are very out of touch with people's views, and so the fact that, you know, Guido, GB News, and others of different political persuasions have come onto the market in recent years is great, isn't it? It's broadened the debate, and it's meant that there aren't these barriers. And actually, politicians should embrace it as well. You know, the fact that I can do a video now on an issue like fare dodging and it get viewed 15 or 20 million times gives you an incredible platform to raise the concerns of the public and to speak directly to the public unfiltered.
So how do you get your news now? Do you mainly get it through the traditional channels, mainstream outlets, or are you also looking at some of the new stuff as well?
Yeah, mostly online. I mean, I watch the news, but I don't watch a massive amount of telly, to be honest. I mean, most of it I get on my phone on the go now. So it is the new media, and I think some of the old media is I say massively out of touch with the kind of people that I represent, the people I grew up with in Wolverhampton. You look at the other day when I went on, I was featured on Thought for the Day on Radio 4 and accused of being xenophobic for saying that I would be worried for the safety of my young daughters if a migrant hotel opened up in my town. Well, I suspect I speak for most people in this country, certainly millions of people, and yet that was something that Radio 4, a flagship programme, enabled to go out on TV. So it's great if new voices are able to open up and express the views of the public.
Does that make you angry still? You've been in politics for a long time. If you see something like that on Radio 4, which is still very popular, do you get frustrated or does it sort of bounce off you at this point?
It's kind of water off a duck's back, but it shouldn't be happening. And I do think there is flagrant bias on the BBC. And, you know, I believe in freedom of speech. People can say, by and large, what they like about me.
Yeah, of course.
But there should be balance. That's the point, isn't it? There should be balance. Somebody should be putting the counter view. And, you know, when you go, for example, to the migrant protest in Epping, most of the people I met, in fact, everyone I spoke to, were just ordinary members of the public. You had mums and grandmas, dads, you had teenage girls. These are just normal people. So the views that I'm expressing are certainly ones that are shared by a lot of people in this country. And the BBC and other outlets should be giving balance and enabling those people's views to be heard.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Calais. You mentioned it briefly earlier. Can you just give us a broad overview of what it was like? And then I want to dig into specifically your takeaways from it and what the French are doing and whether that situation is reparable. So broadly, so how long were you there and a brief overview of the experience?
So we went for 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
and we went to some of the beaches where a lot of the small boats have left from, in and around Calais. And we went to one, probably the biggest of the migrant camps that exists today, a place called Lune Plage outside Gravelines. And that is a dark, lawless place. No police presence, no authorities whatsoever. A place where people have been shot dead recently. A lot of crime. People have knives, guns, dominated by people smugglers, kind of gangsters who are very present there. They come up to you, talk to you, try and get you to leave.
Do you feel in danger at that point?
It felt quite a menacing place to be, and they asked me to leave. We kept on talking to people, and then they started to chuck stuff at us like glass bottles. So we did, in the end, make our move. But it was worth visiting nonetheless, because the obvious reflection is the people you meet there are on their way to the UK. So if you feel threatened by these people, then tomorrow, the next day, they might be staying in a migrant hotel or in an HMO next door to you. So if you don't want to walk through that camp, you don't want these people in our country either. I also talked to migrants who said to me that, most of them didn't speak good English. When I asked those who did what skills they had, what profession they had, almost no one was able to say they had something that they could contribute to the UK.
Right.
They're obviously going to be people who would be a big draw on the taxpayer. Hard up Brits were going to suffer as a result. And no one, literally no one, said they were fleeing persecution. Their reasons for coming to the UK were purely economic.
Mostly young men as well?
Almost all young.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the worst thing of all that we found was when we spotted a group of migrants in the early evening who were holding life jackets. Some even had them on, clearly on the move, heading towards the beaches. We followed them. They got on a public bus. I mean, imagine that you're getting a public bus somewhere in London or in Newark, and 40 or 50 migrants holding life jackets get on. It's not exactly subtle. It's all in plain sight. Everyone knows this is happening.
But
and yet nothing is being done to stop
We've sent millions to France for this, right?
Exactly. I mean, it is a total farce.
Yeah.
And then they hid out near the beach in Dunkirk, where we watched them for several hours. And then when they started to leave and presumably head towards the beach, we phoned the French police, because I'm not a journalist. We're not there as a purely academic exercise. I'm there because I want to stop them.
You want to stop them, yeah.
I don't want these people to come to our country. So I phoned the police, and they said, well, we'll pass it on. And I said, well, aren't you going to do anything about it? And they said, well, probably not. And we're giving £800 million to these people. And they were completely dismissive of it when I literally found a people smuggling gang and a group of migrants who were probably heading to one of the beaches.
Yeah. And on camera.
So that tells me a lot, that the money we've been spending is being wasted. The French are basically laughing at us. But more importantly, you can't rely on the kindness of strangers to secure your own borders. If, like me, you care passionately about border security, you've got to take the matter into your own hands. That's why you've got to have a proper deterrent, not this laughable one in, one out policy of Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, but where every single migrant who comes to this country is detained immediately and deported as quickly as possible, either back home to their own country or to a safe third country. That's the only way to end this.
So the Conservative government did have that deterrent in place eventually, which was the Rwanda policy. You had a massive majority in government, and that still ultimately didn't work. So would you reintroduce something like that again, but then you'd have to supplement it with even stronger proposals like we said, leaving the ECHR, the Human Rights Act? Is this all part, so it's a constellation of things you have to do?
Yeah, well, look, I knew how to fix this problem. The way to do it was to strengthen the Rwanda policy so that we end the merry-go-round of legal claims, like leave the European Convention on Human Rights, get out of the Human Rights Act, all of the legal issues that prevented us from implementing the Rwanda policy, and then detain and deport people immediately upon arrival. It was to my immense frustration that I couldn't persuade Rishi Sunak and the rest of the cabinet to do this
What are they
in
saying?
the autumn of 2023.
What are they saying when you're having these conversations? Why is it not happening?
Well, you'd have to ask them, but I think at its heart, I just don't think there was the political will.
Right.
I don't think everybody else quite shared my exasperation, my anger at what was happening, and didn't appreciate the depth of feeling in the country. And some people were more concerned about our reputation on the international stage, respectability, our continued membership of international organisations, over
Some people within cabinet.
over resolving this problem once and for all. And if you go to a protest like the one in Epping,
Yep, like you did.
you talk to the mums and the dads and the grandmothers who are sat there, just good, fair-minded, patriotic people, and you ask them, would you rather the UK continues to be a member of the European Convention on Human Rights, or we stop this racket, this hotel returns to doing weddings and golden wedding anniversary parties and your daughter's 21st party? You stop spending billions of pounds on this issue. You end the crime so that people are not being sexually assaulted. People are not scared to walk the streets of this town. To a man and a woman, they would say, without flinching, get on, do what's necessary, end this farce once and for all.
Do you think the Prime Minister should or will go to one of these protests?
Well, he should do. Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper, they should go to Epping or to Altrincham or Fareham or Diss or any of the other towns across this country where decent people are out on the streets protesting. Will he? Well, I'd be very surprised. But the people I spoke to, they just want to be listened to, and they think that their views are being totally dismissed at the moment. In fact, it's worse than that. They're not even being just dismissed. They're being smeared. They're being smeared as racist for just being concerned, for being good parents who are worried about the safety of their children. And I don't think it's the senior Labour politicians, like the cabinet ministers, or the senior officials in the civil service, or frankly, some of the people in the media who talk about this, who are living next to these hotels. They're not on their street. They think it's someone else's problem. And that's why they're so keen to dismiss it. So people should get out. They should go to these places and actually talk to the public who are being ignored time and again.
Do you think, I'm interested in your views more broadly on the Labour Party. Just briefly, do you think Keir Starmer will actually still be the Prime Minister come the next election? Do you think he'll stick around?
Well, look, I don't know. It's hard for me to judge that and to speak about the internal process of the Labour Party, but I don't think Keir Starmer is necessarily a bad man. I just think he is fundamentally ill-suited to being Prime Minister. This is someone who has no vision for this country. He has a total inability to communicate with the public. He doesn't even seem to communicate with his own colleagues in the Labour Parliamentary Party. And at his heart, he's somebody who thinks that the system basically works. And that means that he is a tinkerer. He goes an inch where you need to go a mile. Let me give you some examples. Look at welfare reform. The benefits bill in this country is out of control. Public spending on it is rising year after year after year. It's not impossible that we may have some kind of financial crisis in the years ahead because the bond markets just have no confidence in the ability of the government to keep meeting its bills. And yet, what did he propose? Very modest changes that wouldn't even reduce the benefits bill. It would just stop it rising quite as fast. And then he couldn't get that past his own backbenchers. There are so many other examples. This is a man who doesn't understand that the country is actually in a very serious situation, that we are facing rapid economic and societal decline. And you desperately need, at this moment, somebody who is going to grip the country, who is going to change it, bring forward radical change to reverse the decline, arrest our recent decline and put the country back on the footing that it needs to be. Because I am optimistic about the country. I think that we are a strong country, we're a great country, but we're going in the wrong direction. We're making the wrong choices. And we've got a small number of things very badly wrong, like net zero, the housing crisis, mass migration, over-regulation, asymmetric multiculturalism, the failure of our institutions and schools, so many things. And you've got to get some serious answers to these big challenges.
So you mentioned asymmetrical multiculturalism. You just define that. What does that mean? Because we got this controversy about flags being put up in councils, the St George's flag, the Union Jack. What does that all mean to you?
Well, look, I think that is the perfect example of asymmetric multiculturalism, priding and valorising every other culture other than our own, every other national identity other than British identity. So you've got councils like Tower Hamlets and Birmingham being very slow to take down flags of Gaza and Pakistan, but rushing to take down Union flags and the flag of St George. You know, I did the London Marathon earlier in the year, and you run across London Bridge, you know, Tower Bridge, one of the best moments of the whole thing, straight into Tower Hamlets. Every single lamppost from that point on has got the Gaza flag hanging on that. Why do that? You know, why bring politics into it, frankly, but also why celebrate the flags of other countries, not our own? In my constituency, in Newark, people are going out this week to put up flags on the lampposts to celebrate our country. That is what we should be doing. And that, frankly, is what gives us a unifying sense of national togetherness and the identity, British, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish, that we should be celebrating and we should have pride in our country.
So finally, Robert, thanks for coming in. I want to ask you one more question. It's about how you were described recently, I think in the Telegraph. They described you as an unlikely radical. Are they right? Are you an unlikely radical?
Look, I've always tried to bring forward serious answers to the challenges that the country faces. Sometimes they have been radical. Look at what I did when I was housing secretary. I tried to completely change our broken planning system so that we can actually get things built again. And not just houses, but roads, railways, data centres, factories, the things that drive economic growth. But at its heart, help young people onto the housing ladder. And that didn't always make me popular. In fact, it was quite unpopular with some people at the time who didn't want to see more houses being built, our towns and cities being densified, people building,
particularly within your own
people
party,
building upwards. Exactly. But it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And for too long, politicians have turned a blind eye, not been prepared to take on the big challenges facing the country. And as a result of that, our country is in decline. So we need now to have some radical answers to the housing crisis, to mass migration, to the economy, to net zero, to the big, tough challenges that the country is facing if we're going to reverse our decline.
I know I said that was the last one, but I just want to dig in very slightly more, because that must make you a little bit unpopular in the tea room with your own MPs, right? Because some of them have very different views on this, or they did. I mean, you just said that made you unpopular. So
well,
are you having these conversations now?
It did at the time, but I think more people have come around to my point of view, because you see it all around us. I mean, it is just wrong that we live in a country where people of your generation cannot get on the housing ladder. I think the social contract has been shredded in recent years, where the cost of housing, taxes, the cost of childcare makes it hard for people like yourself to have the kind of life that even I did 20 years ago when I was leaving school and university. We've got to change that. And if the Tory party is going to have any future, it's got to get younger people to see that we have actual answers to the challenges that we face and that we're on their side.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us. If you are a subscriber, you can carry on watching. We're going to have a bit more of a conversation. We'll get the beers out. If you're not a subscriber, you can sign up, carry on watching us, carry on this conversation. But thank you all for watching at home.